Noritoshi began saying that they were trying to perform their mission. But Todo screamed that Yuji was his. Afraid of triggering his rage, Noritoshi began to leave, but commanded Todo to kill him. On the other hand, Momo spotted Yuji's team as they continued running towards the monsters, and realized they were ahead in the contest. But as she tried to warn her team, Fushiguro's cursed bird appeared before her, and blasted her with lightning. Seeing the bird, Noritoshi directed his team to rescue her. But as two of them ran towards the girl, Zenin appeared from the trees and began attacking Kasumi while Fushiguro attacked Noritoshi. Meanwhile, Panda and Kujisaki were already waiting for Momo to climb down, and she realized she was in deep shit. At the same time, Yuji and Todo had started battling again, but none of Yuji's attacks were able to penetrate through Todo's defenses, and even when he did connect, Todo was able to kick him away before Yuji suplexed him down. But after Todo landed two massive punches to his core, Yuji began flipping backwards and spun on a tree branch, nearly kicking Todo's face off. As he managed to dodge it, he thought that Yuji had an incredible toughness, but as he noticed he had vanished, Yuji flew down to punch his head before he knew it. So they continued using their martial arts to catch the other off guard. But as Yuji's right cross was able to connect and punch Todo away, Todo realized that Yuji was extremely strong. However, he realized that his cursed energy was off and screamed that Yuji was wrong. His voice echoed across the forest, and Zenin realized he must have foiled his own team's plan to kill Yuji. However, when she asked why Kasumi was keeping her true technique away from her group, Kasumi began saying that she has no desire to kill Yuji or anyone else. She only hoped to win the contest, because the winners would get recommendations to be promoted to a higher rank, and would make more money for her broke little siblings. As she drew her katana, Zenin told her that she won't be holding back anymore. Meanwhile, Todo was disgusted with how Yuji's cursed energy would lag after his strikes, and said that their friendship wouldn't last if he was okay with staying at this level. However, Yuji couldn't care less about their friendship. But when Todo asked him if he was okay with being weak, a flame awakened inside of Yuji. So as Yuji charged at him, they started exchanging blows, but Yuji punched his useless teeth and eventually wrestled him to the ground. But as he followed up with his divergent fist, Todo smashed his hand, causing the energy to disappear. When Yuji wondered how he managed to do so, Todo began lecturing him about cursed energy, but decided to reveal how it should have been done. Inside of his hot ripped body, there was a flame nurtured on the negativity of his spirit, so if he would harness it from his core through his shoulder and into his arm, he would begin lagging. His spiritual body should be treated as a whole being, rather than individual parts, and as Yuji heard those words, he began listening to the noise of nature around him. At that moment, he realized what he was doing wrong, and summoned the cursed energy all over his body. So as they prepared for another showdown, Todo was ready to reveal his full power. Meanwhile, Kujisaki was trying to persuade Momo to climb down the tree, telling her that they intend to spare her life after beating her ass up. Just then, Panda noticed an enemy behind the trees, but was blasted at that instant. As Mekamaru appeared from the darkness, he began saying that Panda's ass has been put to sleep, so Momo descended at that instant, saying that she would destroy Kujisaki. However, Panda woke up at that moment and landed a massive strike that caused him to retreat. As Panda readied himself for battle, the real Mekamaru, who was sick inside a room, vowed to eliminate him. So he revealed his weapon and activated sword option before boosting it with a drill. As he rushed towards Panda, he flew into the air and descended with an ultra spin, destroying the tree before him. However, Panda managed to escape, but realized that Mekamaru was strong after all. Immediately, Mekamaru launched a blast towards him, but Panda summoned his cursed energy, allowing him to survive the blast unscathed. Before he could attack again, Panda began hitting him with a barrage of punches, but as Mekamaru tried fighting back, Panda wrestled him to the ground and knocked him away with his butt, sending him stumbling down. Right then, he activated Ultimate Mekamaru, and increasing the power of his attack to Albatross mode. He was ready to obliterate Panda in that instant. At the same time, Panda realized that Kujisaki would be toast if he decides to evade the blast, so he braced himself for the attack. Right then, Mekamaru unleashed his ultimate cannon, blasting Panda with enough fire to obliterate his entire existence. So by the time it was over, Mekamaru thought that Panda was annihilated for sure, and began to leave, but Panda appeared in the smoke. When Mekamaru wondered how he survived his greatest attack, he realized that Panda has entered gorilla mode. So Panda revealed that he was finally ready to destroy every organ in his fake body and flashed towards him. Desperate to stop him, Mekamaru activated Ultra Shield, but Panda's energy crushed the spikes, sending him crashing through the trees. He had failed to realize that Panda's cursed body was created with 3 separate cores, but with his previous attacks already destroying 2 of the cores, Panda was on his last life. As Mechamaru landed on the roof, he discovered his arm was damaged, so Panda told him that his drumming beat attack was strong enough to destroy entire cities. So he jumped on the roof, ready to end the fight as soon as he could. As they flew at each other, Mechamaru began trying to evade him, but Panda nearly bashed his face into the roof. As the smoke cleared, Mechamaru managed to blast him away, but Panda followed him, nearly bashing him into the ground. Even so, he continued following him, even penetrating his energy blast, but as he tried to punch his disgusting face, Mechamaru dodged his blow and escaped to the other side. However, Panda continued chasing him and followed him to the final roof. So with nowhere else to run, Mechamaru kicked a tile towards him, and utilizing the distraction, he flew past him to the other side. As he noticed the position of Panda's final core, he blasted him at the spot and was glad that he finally defeated him. However, Panda caught him immediately, telling him that he faked the position of his core, and bashed his face, ripping his good arm off at the same time. Meanwhile, Fushiguro was trying to evade Noritoshi's attacks, and managed to dodge the cursed arrows, before jumping on a wood plank and escaping immediately. However, Noritoshi wouldn't stop, as he launched another set of arrows, but Fushiguro smashed them instantly, and his cursed toads caught the last arrows before they pierced him. With Noritoshi having only 1 arrow left, he decided to launch it at the roof and utilize the distraction to punch Fushiguro away. But as he managed to maintain his balance, he realized that Noritoshi was using blood sorcery. Just then, Noritoshi opened his blood eye, and as he vanished to his side, he smacked him into the wall. Meanwhile, the useless principal already prepared a first-grade cursed spirit, and had told Noritoshi that it would be released into the forest once he blows its whistle. Inside the forest, as Inumaki spotted the cursed monster, a superior monster slayed him, but as Inumaki sensed the threat from Hanami, he tried using his cursed speech. In the meantime, Mahito had arrived inside the school and was ready to begin the next phase of his plans. But at the same time, Fushiguro launched towards Noritoshi, but none of their attacks were able to connect, until Noritoshi blocked Fushiguro's attack and destroyed his tonfa, sending him sliding back. However, Fushiguro couldn't care less about this world, and only cared about what he believed in his heart. He wanted to save people, and said that if he was bent on killing the person he cared about, then he swore that Noritoshi would be the one getting killed. Just then, a cursed toad entered the corridor, and began jumping towards Noritoshi, but it dissolved before he could attack it. As Noritoshi discovered it was actually a trap, Fushiguro summoned a cursed elephant at that moment. Without hesitating, the elephant spewed an ocean of water, sweeping him outside the building. Even so, Fushiguro wasn't done yet, as he summoned his cursed bird to blast him with lightning, electrifying his entire body. However, Noritoshi would not surrender, and decided to use his blood manipulation technique. So as the blood bag exploded, the blood trapped the bird in a tight grip, and pulled it towards the ground, causing it to dissolve instantly. But as they ran at each other again, a giant mysterious structure burst out of the ground, and began stretching towards them. As they wondered what it was, Inumaki appeared on the roof and commanded them to run away, barely managing to escape their death. But as the gate exploded, thick vines burst inside, making the boys realize they were trapped. At the same time, Danny Boner's villainous cousin, Danny Loner, discovered that Mahito's summon had begun to attack, so he hammered a curse into the ground, and cast a spell that caused the veil to begin spreading across the forest. By the time Gojo and the others arrived, they discovered that the veil had completely sealed up the forest. Thinking he could break it, Gojo decided to test its strength, but it burned his hand at that instant. However, as Lori decided to touch the veil and discovered she could penetrate inside, Gojo realized that the veil was created to keep him outside. The power of a jujitsu veil depended on the conditions that were used to create it, so when every single person except Gojo was able to enter, even his limitless power struggled to break through. As Lori and Yoshinudo decided to go through to the other side, they sensed the presence of a powerful special grade monster, but Danny appeared before them. Realizing he was an enemy, Yoshinudo told Lori to search for the students, and said that he would take care of business here. But as Danny revealed his axe, ready to break his worthless bones, Yoshinudo revealed his guitar, and told him that he would whip his ugly face across the hard ground. Meanwhile, Fushiguro and the others were still trapped inside the school. As he tried calling Gojo, Hanami appeared before him and smacked the phone away. But as Inumaki commanded him to hold still, Noritoshi tried slaying him with his blood technique, but Hanami was unscathed. Immediately, Fushiguro's cursed bird electrified him, allowing him to slash Hanami across the leg. But he discovered that the monster wasn't even scratched. Just then, Hanami began speaking to them, but they wondered how they were able to understand his words. He began telling them that his only desire was to protect the planet, seeing as humans were slowly eating away at the Earth's health. His destiny was to destroy all of humanity, and said that he would turn them into cursed spirits when they were dead. Before long, he started chasing the boys through the school, but as Hanami nearly ended them with stakes, Inumaki commanded him with his cursed speech, allowing Noritoshi to graze his face with piercing blood. As they began running again, Noritoshi hoped that they would successfully continue with the same strategy until they made it outside the veil. But as they jumped on a roof, Hanami continued following them. Thinking they could subdue him, Fushiguro sent his cursed bird to attack him, but as Inumaki tried saying another command, Hanami killed the bird, and Inumaki's throat exploded at the same time. But as he appeared before Noritoshi, he punched him away, but Fushiguro managed to catch him. Realizing Hanami was one of the strongest curses he'd faced, Fushiguro tried activating his ultimate power, but Inumaki stopped him and began walking towards Hanami. As he got close enough, he commanded him to get lost, sending Hanami crashing into a roof, but he passed out at that moment. However, Hanami returned and blocked Zenin's attack, causing her sword to break in half. At the same time, Fushiguro slashed across his face and managed to split one of his horns, forcing him to retreat. However, as the horn grew back, Fushiguro pulled out cursed tools from a dark portal, hoping they would be powerful enough to weaken the monster. So as Zenin smacked him with her weapon, Hanami went crashing through the forest, so Fushiguro summoned a cursed dog, and as it began charging at him, it managed to slice across his arm. But as his arm healed instantly, Zenin nearly slashed it off again. However, Hanami was unscathed, so Fushiguro attacked him from behind, and immediately swapped weapons with Zenin. So they charged again, and slashed across his body at the same time. But Fushiguro noticed a bud growing out of his body as a vine pierced Zenin at that instant. She was impressed that Zenin managed to block her heart, but told her that she would continue to be vulnerable if she keeps trying to protect her friend. As Fushiguro's dog ran at Hanami, it dissolved just as it touched him, but Zenin realized that Fushiguro must have cancelled his technique to save his strength. Immediately, she attacked again, but as Hanami smacked her away, he captured her and began saying that she has grown too weak to fight. Afraid she would be killed, Fushiguro tried to reveal his ultimate powers, but Zenin stopped him just in time, as Todo and Yuji landed at that moment, successfully rescuing her. Thinking they would get their ass clapped,
Pause.
Fushiguro tried telling the boys to run away, but Todo directed them to leave the veil, saying that they would take care of business. So as Panda carried them away, Yuji prepared for battle, but Todo decided to step aside, saying that he wouldn't interfere with the fight unless Yuji manages to awaken his Black Flash technique. With Yuji ready to prove himself, he decided to ask Hanami if he was allied with Mahito, and when she told him that she was, he lost control of his mind and began rushing forward. Immediately, he landed an axe kick to expose Hanami's vulnerability, but as he tried to activate his Black Flash, he remembered the way she had hurt all of his friends and lost control of his cursed energy technique. But as he cast vines towards him, Yuji jumped outside the water. Right then, Todo smacked his ugly face and began telling him that anger was an emotion that would trigger the strongest reactions within humans, but was also the distraction that made cursed energy attacks fail. He smacked his ugly face once again, telling him to swallow up his anger. As he began walking back, Todo knew that Black Flash was an attack where cursed energy is applied within 1/1,000,000th of a second, creating a distortion in space. No sorcerer in humanity has been able to consistently use it at will, but activating it once would be enough to expand his knowledge to heavenly levels. So as Yuji faced off with Hanami once more, he managed to maintain his focus. In an instant, Hanami rushed towards Yuji, but he was able to distort space itself. As Yuji began oozing with cursed energy, he realized that this was the power of Black Flash. At that moment, Hanami regenerated his arm, but Todo was convinced that they would defeat him, and said that they must annihilate him before he recovers. At the same time, Hanami realized they were a strong pair after all, and decided to reveal his special flower arm. Immediately, he summoned mighty vines out of the water, but as they managed to evade everything, Todo told Yuji that Hanami exchanged his speed and strength for this new power, and thought they would have the advantage. Just then, Hanami appeared behind them, launching little weeds like bullets, but as they managed to dodge everything, they landed a massive strike that caused Hanami to nearly fall back. However, as they charged again, Hanami caused the vines to disappear, so as they began falling towards the ground, he launched new vines towards them, but they managed to bounce off each other and escape getting isekai'd. At that moment, however, Hanami remembered Mahito's words, who already told him to enjoy the battles, because it was their purpose as cursed spirits. On the other hand, Yuji and Todo were unscathed from the fall, but as Yuji spotted Hanami, he began running at him. So as they started trading blows, Yuji managed to kick him away, but as he blocked Todo's kick, he enchanted them with cursed flowers before summoning spikes out of the ground. And at that moment, Hanami finally understood the true meaning of Mahito's words, as he realized that he was actually enjoying this fight. However, Todo already had enough of his useless face, and revealed that he was ready to unleash his own curse technique. So he told Yuji to continue fighting no matter what, and began to unravel Hanami's spirit. By the time he figured out a plan, they started charging at the same time. But before they knew it, a vine seized Todo's ankle and began waving him around, but as it released him, he started tumbling away. Immediately, Hanami attacked Yuji to stop him from saving Todo, but as he thought Todo would be killed for sure, he clapped at the last moment, activating an exchange spell that swapped his position with Hanami. However, Hanami survived the attack. But as he wondered what kind of technique it was, Todo revealed that his technique swaps his position with his opponent. But Yuji realized he wasn't saying the entire truth. Hoping to eliminate Hanami before he discovers everything, they started running at him at the same time, as Todo continued clapping his hand to swap their positions. So as they surrounded him, they began attacking his body, utilizing Todo's technique to swap positions every second, as they punched holes into his body before Todo followed up with a brutal kick. While Hanami was wondering who the greater threat was, Yuji uppercutted his face, before following with a roundhouse kick. Before Hanami would recover, Todo continued with his brutal attacks, and Yuji nearly broke his jaw as they tried to weaken his body. With Todo's claps unending, Hanami began wondering if he was trapped inside a spell, but Yuji weakened his knee, and as he prepared a punch, he hit him with Black Flash, nearly paralyzing his body. Even so, Yuji wasn't done, and hit him with a Black Flash kick, nearly ripping his head off. As Yuji hit him with a third Black Flash, breaking the laws of physics that only the greatest sorcerers were able to accomplish, Todo appeared behind Hanami. But as he thought Todo intends to swap positions again, he clapped his hands, but Hanami discovered it was a mere distraction, as Yuji hit him with the fourth Black Flash, shattering all the laws of physics and curse techniques. As Hanami launched root bombs towards them, Yuji shattered it with a kick, but Todo broke it in an instant, and immediately wrestled Hanami to the ground. As he followed with a strike, he clapped his hands, swapping positions with Yuji, but as they tried to attack at the same time, Hanami managed to evade them, and summoned large vines out of the ground. But as he directed them to attack again, Todo clapped his hands, swapping positions with him, but Hanami launched spikes towards him, and exchanged blows with Yuji at the same time. At that moment, Yuji realized he was starting to figure out Todo's technique, but Todo thought they would successfully exorcise him. However, Hanami was enjoying the battle, and summoned an ugly monster plant out of the ground. But as he directed them towards Yuji, Todo clapped his hands again, switching Yuji's place with Hanami. At that moment, Hanami realized that Todo had lied about his technique, but Todo fueled his body with cursed energy, thinking he would easily repel the cursed buds. At the last moment, however, he realized that the cursed buds actually feed on energy, and caused it to dispel immediately, barely surviving the attack. Before Hanami knew it, Yuji hit him with double kicks, allowing Todo to plant a solid kick deep into his shoulder. In an instant, he swapped Yuji with a cursed nunchuck, as Fushiguro already told him that he hid the weapon inside the riverbed. But Yuji began wondering how he teleported to the river. As Todo struck the ground, he smashed Hanami in the face, but he nearly took Todo's head off with a stake. As Todo wondered how he managed to survive the attack, he discovered that Hanami was draining the life force from all the plants. So Hanami revealed that his flaming arm has the ability to convert life force into cursed energy, as it began blossoming into a rose. However, as he revealed that the energy stays inside the flower, he prepared to unleash a mighty energy blast that would annihilate Todo. But Hanami realized that Todo could easily switch places with him. Meanwhile, at the Veil's entrance, Yoshinudo managed to blast Danny with the cursed energy from his guitar, sending him sliding back. However, Danny thought he could kill him, and told him that he would create a wallet out of his weak, worthless bones. On the other hand, Lori was running towards the remaining students, but as an ugly dude tried slashing her from behind, she managed to dodge his attack. Realizing he was human, she wondered if he was the cursed user that was working with the cursed monsters, but noticed his strange sword. Just then, Kujisaki and Mai arrived, and the girls told him to scram because an ugly dweeb looking moron like him would never get laid. At that moment, they realized the veil was starting to dissipate, but the loser ran away immediately. Right then, Gojo spotted Yuji, and noticed that his cursed energy has increased, but when he saw Todo next to him, he realized that he must have been the reason. Seeing that they were able to hold Hanami off, he decided to ignore him for the time being. So as he teleported to Danny, the ugly moron tried attacking him, but with a single glance, Gojo caused his body to shred into pieces. However, he realized that Hanami was trying to run away.
少し乱暴しようか。術式順転青、術式反転赤。
Hanami realized she would die fighting Gojo and began to surround his body with thick vines. But as Yuji tried to attack him, Todo commanded him to hold still.
Kyoshiki. Murasaki. 払えたかどうかもわからん。イエーイ！一件落着！ってわけにはいかないか。任務完了っと。
A few weeks later, during the night of Halloween in Shibuya, a mysterious veil surrounded the entire area, sealing everyone inside. So as one loser tried exiting the carnival, he bumped into the invisible wall, and a huge vacuum began sucking up all the people. A few hours later, as Ajichi revealed the news outside, he told Nanami that only sorcerers could enter and exit the veil, and Knitter revealed that everyone was calling for Gojo, even though they had no idea who he was. But inside the barrier, the people were growing restless, and an ugly fatso began screaming for Gojo. However, as he penetrated the veil, he bumped into the fatso and wondered who this loser was. But as he looked down at all the people, he realized that another veil was underground, trapping thousands of others inside. At the same time, Yuji had discovered that Gojo was sent inside alone, and began wondering how they could support him. But at that moment, Mei told him that they were heading somewhere else, as another veil had been lowered over the Meiji Shrine station. Meanwhile, Gojo was descending into the Shibuya station, and as Jogo, Hanami, and Choso appeared before him, Jogo told him that they would defeat him this time. A few minutes later, as crows flew into the station, Mei began to scout the area through their eyes, but a monster crushed them in an instant. However, she already figured out a plan, and wondered if Yuji would rather fight a single special class monster, or would eliminate all the transfigured humans. Taking the transfigured humans as innocent people, Yuji offered to take on the monster instead, so Mei showed him a map of the underground station, telling him to lift the veil once he defeats the monster, as it was the only way to free the regulars. Just as Yuji arrived inside the station, he spotted the monster devouring a human, but saw a mysterious object in the ground, wondering if it was the thing holding up the veil. So while the grasshopper was saying that a human like him would never stand a chance against a curse, Yuji smacked it with a kick, and followed with a punch, knocking it into the wall. He began saying that humans aren't weak, but the monster got up and began desperately trying to bite his head off, making Yuji realize that it was a special grade curse. As it flashed to his side, Yuji managed to flip away, but the grasshopper released its wings and began flying towards him. Luckily, Yuji darted into the opening, managing to evade the monster, but as it followed him, they continued their fierce battle, bursting into another hallway before crashing through again. As the grasshopper began wondering why he was running away, it called him a weakling, but Yuji began to approach it, looking to prove himself. And as he stood before its eyes, he awakened his divergent fists. As they striked against one another, they began trading blows with lightning-fast speed, matching each other's strength, until Yuji managed to find an opening, and began hammering the monster with overwhelming blows that weakened its body. As it grew desperate to annihilate him, it spewed toxin towards his face, But as Yuji dodged, ready to end it with his divergent fist, the monster extended its tail, looking to end him at that instant. Luckily, Yuji smacked it away and ripped into the tail, calling it payback for all the lives it took. And at that moment, he broke the mysterious object, and Mei realized that the veil has been lifted. At the same time, Mahito sensed that the monster had been slain, and wished he could get in some of the action, but soon began to leave. Before long, Yuji reunited with Mei and Yu, and they began running deeper into the station. Just then, they noticed a girl inside the station, and Yuji hurried to meet her. Inside the Shibuya station, Gojo realized that the exit was being blocked, but he revealed that he has no intentions of leaving. He thought they lured him here to threaten him with the regulars, and said he wouldn't try to escape. A few weeks ago, while cooking up their plans, Geto had revealed that Gojo could only use his full powers when he was isolated, and that it would be impossible to do so once he was surrounded by regulars. At that moment, Jogo opened the barricades, and hundreds of people fell into the rail track. Gojo realized that the exit was sealed so he wouldn't notice the regulars on the sides, but as Jogo summoned his cursed energy, he began to obliterate them, and even Hanami got in on the action. At the same time, Choso unleashed his blood manipulation technique, but it dispersed before his eyes. Before Gojo knew it, Jogo and Hanami had already appeared before him, directing their fists towards his face. Geto had told them that Gojo's curse technique reversal was twice as powerful as his amplification technique, and due to this, he couldn't possibly use this technique in countering their attacks without destroying the entire station. But just as they got close enough and casted a domain amplification spell, they began drawing even closer, pushing through his barrier. But Gojo vanished before their eyes, making them collide. When the dust settled, Gojo landed on a wall, realizing their domain amplification spell was supposed to neutralize his limitless technique and land a hit on him. A few days ago, Jogo had wondered how they could avoid Gojo's infinite void, so Geto told him that Gojo wouldn't use this technique because the expansion of his domain would crush all the normal humans. However, he warned them not to cast their domain either, saying it would only trigger Gojo into casting his own. Just then, a useless girl began to cry, but as a worthless simp tried to help her, Jogo killed him at that instant and said it was Gojo's punishment for running away, before burning the body.
正直驚いたよ。この程度で僕に勝てると思ってる脳みそに驚いたって言ってんだよ。
However, Geto had already told the cursed spirits to keep Gojo distracted for at least 20 minutes while he prepares to trap him inside the prison realm. As Gojo pointed at the weed, he told him that he would be the first to get sent off to Nirvana, and began walking towards him. Just as he stood before their eyes, they tried to punch him at the same time, but he caught Jogo's arm and flipped him to the other side, dodging Hanami's kick. However, he began riding his arm, and as he ripped it out, he threw Hanami to the ground, making him realize that Gojo actually intends to focus his attack on Jogo. But as Gojo kicked him off, he sent him flying 100 yards away, before sending Jogo flying into the far wall. Hanami noticed that Gojo had stopped using his limitless technique, but was now only using physical attacks. Realizing he could finally use his own technique, Hanami summoned roots from out of the ground, directing them towards Gojo, giving him the opening he needed and allowing him to maneuver his way onto Hanami. Gojo had discovered that Hanami couldn't use his domain amplification and innate technique at the same time, making him vulnerable to physical attacks. Right then, Choso unleashed Blood Curse, but as the blood spilled off of him, he saw all the people who died at that instant. He realized that Choso wasn't a cursed spirit, but as Jogo noticed his distraction, he tried to blindside him, but the lights went off at the station. However, Gojo revealed that the more they tried to neutralize his limitless technique, the stronger he would have to maintain it, saying that the asparagus couldn't withstand it anymore.
五条悟、こっちを見ろ。次。
While they were preparing their plan, Geto had told them that Gojo must be restrained for a minute before he can be trapped inside the prison realm. But Jogo thought that Geto was sending them on a death mission, So as he grew afraid, realizing he was next, he continued running away, but Gojo followed him. Noticing his distraction once again, Jogo tried kicking him from behind. But after hitting a barrier, he ran off once more. Immediately, Choso directed a long line of blood towards Gojo, piercing through the regulars, but Gojo's barrier froze it up. Meanwhile, Geto was waiting inside the tunnel, and realized that their plan would fail if he tries to trap Gojo now. At the same time in the shrine station, Yuji and the others noticed the girl sitting all by herself, but when Yuji wondered what happened, she said that all the regulars were turned into monsters before getting loaded into the train, but turned into a gruesome monster right before their eyes. Just as Yuji realized it was a trap, Gojo began hearing the sound of the moving train, but everyone was glad that they were finally about to be rescued. As the train screeched to a halt, one ugly loser forced his way to the front, but when the doors opened, the cursed monsters spilled outside and began to devour everyone. While Gojo was still shocked from the sight, Mahito leaped out of the train, but as he tried to attack him, the limitless barrier stopped his attack. And as Gojo tried to punch him, he leaped away immediately. At the same time, more regulars began to spill into the underground, so with a combined attack, Mahito and Choso began to obliterate all of them, spilling their sauce all around him. Thinking he was still distracted, Jogo tried attacking from above, but Gojo ripped his arm off easily. Mahito knew that Gojo wasn't like Yuji, because he was capable of sacrificing others to eliminate the curses. But his only chance of eliminating them was by using his infinite void to kill them along with everyone here. However, Jogo knew the only sacrifices he could accept were those killed by the curses.
領域展開無料空所
Without hesitating, he began sprinting across the station, annihilating all the cursed monsters. This was his gamble on a 2/10 of a second domain expansion to avoid making everyone a vegetable, while causing the curses to fall unconscious so he could kill them. Nearly half a year's worth of information had flown into everyone's brains, but the survivors would wake up from a coma in 2 months. By the time he was done, he had killed 1,000 cursed monsters in 299 seconds, and had grown exhausted. At that moment, Geto commanded the box to open, and it spread open before Gojo's eyes. Realizing it was a trap, Gojo tried to withdraw, but Geto was already waiting behind him. And with Gojo in shock, he began wondering if he was the real Geto, as hours of his memories with him began flashing across his mind at the speed of light. Although a minute was needed for the prison realm to activate, it was only a minute in Gojo's mind, which was less than an instant for normal people. He thought this was his end for sure, but began wondering who the hell he was, having already killed the real Geto. Right then, Geto decided to pull his string, revealing his cursed brain and saying he could possess a body by replacing the brain with his own. Additionally, he could use the body's technique, and revealed that he managed to acquire this body after Gojo killed the real Geto. He had thought this body would be perfect for his plans, and would successfully stun Gojo long enough to be restrained by the prison realm. At the same time in the tunnel, Yuji noticed a wooden earpiece in his ear, but as he tried to destroy it, Mekamaru began telling him that Gojo has been captured, and said he would soon be sealed forever. Back at the Shibuya station, Geto's hand began to squeeze the life out of his body as the soul of the real Geto was trying to end him, but he managed to pull it away. Thinking the other sorcerers would soon show up, he commanded the prison realm to close, and as the eyes opened, it covered up Gojo, shrinking him into the cube to complete the seal. Inside the tunnel, Mei began saying that Mekamaru was telling a lie, and asked for proof that Gojo has been captured, but he told them that Gojo has been sealed already, and that he had programmed his device to activate once Gojo was captured. This was his insurance when he went into battle with Mahito, because a few days ago, Mahito had managed to find his real body, and even defeated his ultimate Mekamaru. He thought Yuji was the only sorcerer he could trust, and told Mei that she has become a target for the high sorcerers. When she thought it was another lie, he told her that they had directed her to the shrine station with Yuji to isolate both of them from the others, and that a curse user was coming to end her life. After sensing the presence of the sorcerer, she suggested they continue deeper into the station, to be certain that Gojo had really been sealed. But Mekamaru revealed that 4 new veils have been lowered over Shibuya, and said that the veil at the end of the tunnel was impregnable. He told them to head out of the tunnel, saying it was their safest option, and suggested that Yuji returns to the shrine station. He thought it wasn't too late to rescue Gojo, and told him to meet up with the others immediately. But at that moment, the cursed user appeared, saying he's come to eliminate Mei. Meanwhile, inside the Shibuya station, Jogo and Choso finally snapped out of the infinite void hypnosis. But as the cube crashed into the ground, Gojo's overwhelming power managed to fry the eyes until his own iris revealed. Inside the cube, he realized that time was limitless, and the twink realized he really screwed up. Outside the Shibuya station, Nanami joined the remaining sorcerers, saying it was time to fight back. However, Fushiguro began wondering why the cursed monsters were after Gojo, and thought he should have come out of the veil already. As Nanami began heading towards the veil, he told Fushiguro and Ino to rescue as many regulars as possible, as they vanished inside. On the other side of the barrier, while Ajichi was reporting to Nida, a loser stabbed him in the back, and continued stabbing him until his soul left his body. At the same time, Mekamaru's device was video recording Geto and the monsters, but as Mahito noticed it, he destroyed the device instantly. However, Mekamaru had already discovered everything, and began telling Yuji that the prison realm was stuck to the ground, and he thought this was their perfect opportunity to rescue Gojo. As he penetrated through the veil, he noticed a transfigured human trying to devour the regulars, so he punched it away. And as the others attacked him, he kicked one in the jaw and knocked away the other. As a new one tried to restrain him, he punched his way through its body, but another charged at him, and he managed to dodge all of its attacks. As he kicked it in the knee, causing it to lose its balance, he followed up with a nasty kick, sending it falling on its face. So after climbing to the rooftop, he began screaming for Nanami, and his voice echoed across the city. As the others began hearing his voice, he screamed that Gojo has been sealed, but as they heard these words, Nanami suggested they meet up with him immediately. Inside the station, Mahito began suggesting they leave before the others arrive, but Geto revealed that he wasn't leaving without the cube, as Choso told them that he would also stay back to kill Yuji for ending his brother. Jogo tried saying they need his body to turn him into Sukuna, and warned Choso to stay away. But as they butt heads, Mahito decided to separate them, but said he also wishes to kill Yuji. With Gojo sealed away, he thought the sorcerers and cursed monsters were now evenly matched, and said that turning Yuji into Sukuna was only a backup plan. But with Jogo unwilling to change his mind, Mahito decided that they spare his life if Jogo finds him first, but vowed to kill him if he first comes across him. But just as he let out those words, he began running off to find Yuji. Inside the city, Yuji continued screaming for Nanami, but after they appeared behind him, Mekamaru began to reveal that the cursed monster controlling Geto's body was Pandemonium. But as Nanami wondered how they could lift the veil to reach the cursed monsters, he told Yuji and Fushiguro to find a way to remove the veil. So as Ino decided to lead the way, he suggested they get to work immediately. With a deep breath, Yuji punched the veil, but as it was unscathed, he wondered if they could ever tear it down. As Fushiguro suggested they look for its weak point and put a hole inside, Yuji began realizing that the veil must be in an obvious spot, as this was the only way to make it stronger. At that moment, they began searching for a standout building, and as they noticed the central tower, they thought it was definitely what they were looking for. Meanwhile, at the rooftop, a thick-faced loser was wondering if they would ever be found, and as he rejoined Granny and one worthless dude, he began saying that no one would climb to the rooftop to find them. But as he let out those words, a thin wire wrapped them up, and as Yuji snapped it, he managed to separate them. Just then, Ino removed one of the cursed objects, and Yuji revealed that the barrier was already programmed in the object. Realizing they needed to lift the veil, Fushiguro suggested they ignore the curse users until all the objects have been found. However, as Ino realized that 2 more objects needed to be destroyed for the barrier to be torn down, Yuji thought one of the objects was with the thick-faced Fatso, and began running towards him. So as he bound him with thin ropes, he began to pull down from the building, and as he burst through a window, he thought Kimi should have broken every bone in his body from the fall. Back on the rooftop, Ino decided to pull down his ski mask, saying he was ready to earn his spot as a first-grade sorcerer. But as Yuji arrived in the street, Fushiguro began telling him that the man was only playing possum, as his blood should have splattered on the ground from the fall. As he realized his trick has been discovered, Kimi decided to stand, so Fushiguro suggested they get rid of him immediately. Back on the rooftop, Ino had already summoned his cursed energy, and as a stake materialized in his hands, he launched it towards them, but Gimmick dodged it easily. However, as it boomeranged, it pierced through his arm, and Ino thought he could kill both of them without breaking a sweat. As he activated his bubble technique, he began rushing towards them, using the water like it was a surfboard, but Gimmick easily dodged all his strikes. As Ino swept his feet and followed up with a kick, Gimmick blocked his attack and tried landing a kick of his own, but he managed to leap away. At the same time, Yuji and Kimi had begun their own fight, and as the cursed wolf appeared, it tried biting his head off, but Fushiguro smacked him from behind, allowing Yuji to follow up with a punch before smacking him again. However, the man was unscathed and slashed across Yuji's body, splattering his blood, but as he tried to finish him off, Yuji blocked his knife before landing a punch that dazed his face. In an instant, a cursed toad restrained him, and as it threw him into the building, the man was still unscathed, eventually landing before them. Back on the rooftop, Ino continued his attacks, but as he hit Gimmick with a punch and followed with a stake, Gimmick endured all of his attacks, and Ino realized he was trying to stall until Granny was done chanting her spell. At that moment, her aura grew stronger, and as she told him that the spell was completed, Ino grew desperate to stop them. As he launched another stake, Gimmick swallowed up a cursed item and caught it easily, as his body had already turned into Toji. Meanwhile, Yuji and Fushiguro were still battling with Kimi, but as he kicked Yuji away, he dodged Fushiguro's blade, nearly taking him down with a kick. But as he managed to hold onto his leg, the back of his weapon sent Kimi into a daze. However, he decided to go on the offense, slashing his knife at Fushiguro, but as he smacked his face, they realized that he didn't get a single scratch. Thinking he could scare him off, Fushiguro began screaming that Gojo would soon arrive, but the man revealed that he already knows that he has been sealed, having heard Yuji scream it from inside the veil. For this reason, all the other curse users were starting to appear, but Fushiguro figured out a plan. As he summoned 1,000 hares, they began leaping towards Kimi, and as one managed to bash his shoulder, Fushiguro trapped him inside a giant pile of hares. Dragging Yuji back, he told him that he has discovered his technique and was ready to create a plan. At the same time, Ino had discovered that Granny was a voodoo sorceress and that she had managed to turn Gimmick's body through a seance. But as Ino tried casting a spell, Toji flashed to his side and destroyed his face with a single blow. Without hesitating, he began to deliver a barrage of punches, completely damaging Ino's face. Meanwhile, Kimi was still trapped in the middle of the hares, but as they vanished, he realized that Yuji and Fushiguro were nowhere in sight. But at that moment, Fushiguro began descending on a giant elephant and pounded him into the ground. However, Kimi managed to lift the elephant, but as it dispersed, Yuji hurled a car towards him. As he managed to catch it, Fushiguro flew to end his life, but as Kimi blocked his attack and missed with his own, Yuji appeared with his divergent fist, so they charged at him at the same time, and Kimi thought they intend to unleash their full power, but they hit him with a normal punch instead. Earlier on, Fushiguro had revealed his technique to Yuji, telling him that it was inverse, a technique that makes powerful attacks weaker, while making weaker attacks more lethal. Fushiguro had noticed that his weaker attacks caused more damage to Kimi, and suggested they hit him with weaker blows. At the same time, Fushiguro's cursed toad had stabbed Kimi in the belly, and as Yuji punched him to the side, they began knocking him from side to side, following with an uppercut before knocking out his teeth. But as he cast a slash, they leaped out of his way, but Yuji had appeared behind him, and was oozing with a powerful aura. As they charged at each other, Yuji froze upright before hitting him, and as his aura dispelled, he punched his face, sending him flying into the railing. Back in the tunnel, Mei had already amputated the loser, and was following him to end his life. When the moron tried begging for her to spare his life, Mei told him he was too ugly to deserve it, and ended him at that instant. At the same time, Yuji destroyed another object, successfully lifting the veil, but they realized that only the veil keeping out the sorcerers was lifted, as the other veils trapping the regulars remained intact. Fushiguro thought that 2 of the objects could be fake, but was glad that they could now move freely around Shibuya. Just then, he noticed Ino falling down from the tower and began running to save him, so as he summoned his cursed bird, it tried catching him midair, but could not break his fall. However, Yuji managed to catch him, but as they discovered Ino was nearly dead, Yuji began wondering how the sorcerers managed to beat him to a pulp. Meanwhile on the rooftop, as Gimmick tried telling Granny that the veil has been lifted, Toji's soul took over his body at that instant. But when Granny noticed something was wrong, she tried asking if he was still in control of the body, but he told her to shut her ugly mouth. And as his words sent her stumbling back, Granny began wondering how Toji managed to return into his body, seeing as she only channeled the power inside his previous body. As Toji told her that his body is special, he revealed that it has suppressed Gimmick's soul. In an instant, he flashed to her side and immediately terminated her life. Meanwhile, inside the tunnel, Mei finally came across Geto, but wondered how he was still alive, having already learned that the real Geto was killed. She told him that she has come to kill him, but he summoned a special grade monster, the smallpox deity, telling her that he would take her on if she manages to exorcise this curse. Immediately, the monster cast a domain expansion spell, sealing Mei inside a coffin, before trapping her inside a huge rock. However, Mei shattered everything to pieces, and Yu thought she would easily defeat the curse. Meanwhile, Yuji was already running through the Shibuya station, and as he jumped down the escalator, he spotted Choso before him. Realizing who he is, Choso prepared blood manipulation and was ready to avenge his brothers. And as he launched piercing blood towards him, it began piercing into his body, but Yuji managed to direct it towards the ceiling, as the blood split the road outside and even severed the street signs. As Choso directed it once again, Yuji decided to run away this time, but as he managed to close the distance, he punched Choso, but he managed to block his attack. Right then, Yuji noticed a hole inside his arm, but Choso decided to ask if his brothers left any last words. Realizing who his brothers were, Yuji decided to tell him that they were only crying in their last moments. But as Choso heard these words, his anger grew worse, and he unleashed blood wings, spreading it across the ceiling. As he rolled it into a blood clot, Yuji sensed the danger, so as he attacked him immediately, he managed to wrestle him to the floor before smacking it away. But as he tried to land a blow, Choso kicked him off and tried piercing his body. But as Yuji managed to escape, he unleashed a blood storm on him, nearly gluing him to the wall. Immediately, he withdrew the blood, almost ripping Yuji's face off, and as he landed a jab, sweeping off his feet, he nearly took his entire face, but plastered the wall instead. Even so, he managed to grab Yuji's hand and knocked him away, but as Yuji stopped himself from slipping off, Choso withdrew all the blood into a single blood clot. At that moment, Yuji realized he was at a disadvantage, as the distance made him open to Choso's attacks. Deciding to try out a plan, he leaped towards the ceiling, but as he landed, Choso directed piercing blood towards him. Luckily, he dodged it and began running towards him. But as he threw a punch, Choso cast Supernova, blowing up the blood clots around him before stabbing Yuji's feet into the floor. However, Yuji endured the pain and managed to land a kick, but Choso eventually knocked him away. He had successfully pierced a hole through Yuji's body, and Yuji realized he couldn't possibly win this fight. But at that moment, he heard Mekamaru's voice from the earpiece, and he began explaining Choso's technique. At the same time, Choso nearly sliced off his head. But as he managed to hide away, Mekamaru suggested a plan and told him to run into the restroom. So as Yuji dodged the piercing blood, he began running towards it, but as Choso sliced the ceiling, he narrowly escaped inside. However, Choso thought he was leading himself into a corner and decided to follow him. As he began hearing Mekamaru's voice, who called him a coward, his anger grew worse as he rushed inside immediately. However, he only noticed the heavy showers and launched piercing blood at the earpiece, shattering it instantly. But Yuji had already snuck up on him. As he readied his divergent fist, Choso withdrew immediately, before crushing the rest of Mekamaru. At the same time, the continued showers were starting to weaken the blood clots as they began to burst, dissolving his convergence. Thinking he would finally get the upper hand, Yuji began approaching him, realizing he couldn't manipulate the blood outside of his body. Just then, the blood flowed into the drain, and both of them prepared for physical combat. So as Yuji punched the vent towards him, Choso parried it away, but as Yuji flew at him, he blocked his kick, before punching him back. As he followed him, throwing quick punches, he knocked him into a toilet, nearly ending him at that instant. But as Yuji bounced off the ceiling, returning with a blow, Choso grabbed his face, slamming him onto the floor, but Yuji escaped his attack. As they began trading blows, Choso dominated with superior agility, but as he pulled Yuji towards him, he managed to bite his hand and followed with a headbutt. Even so, Choso returned again, but Yuji landed a hefty kick and began thinking he could win. But Choso pierced his liver with a blood clot he had managed to preserve. At that moment, Yuji realized he screwed up, having thought that Choso could not use his blood technique inside the showers. However, he managed to regain his balance, and as the memories of his friends began flashing across his mind, he realized they couldn't possibly save Gojo while Choso was still alive, and thought he must kill him at the cost of his own life. Meanwhile, Choso had already lost a couple of teeth from Yuji's attacks, so he began to coagulate his blood, solidifying half of his body at that instant. As they faced off once again, Yuji dodged his blow, nearly kicking his head off at the same time. but as his bloody hand wrecked the restroom, Yuji barely managed to fight him off, and as they bumped fists, his cursed energy burned Choso. However, he launched poison blood, but as Yuji shielded his face, Choso punched him hard into the wall. Growing desperate, Yuji hurled the vent, and as he flipped over him to the other side, he evaded Choso's kick, trying to land his own. But Choso grabbed his leg and flipped him to the ground, nearly ending him with a blood knife. As it exploded, Yuji used a handle to spring a kick on him, and as he followed him, Choso knocked him back before slicing his body. But as Yuji narrowly dodged his blood claws, he returned to slice him up, but just as he blocked his attack, the blood spilled across his face, allowing Choso to land a kick. Even so, Yuji wouldn't surrender as they continued their relentless battle, punching and flipping each other to the ground. Desperate to regain the advantage, Yuji swung on a handle, planting Choso with double kicks, before hurling him into the wall. But as he rushed to end him, he